Great, here we are. Okay, welcome everyone to Autistic Voices Roundtable discussion. Wherever you are joining us from, thank you for watching this roundtable discussion. My name is Philip King Loeb. I am the owner, producer, and host for today's Autistic Moment, a podcast for autistic adults by an autistic adult, and that would be me. Please visit todaysautisticmoment.com to learn about the podcast, listen to the shows, previously published shows, and read about new and upcoming shows and future Autistic Voices Roundtable discussions. This Autistic Voices Roundtable discussions is being sponsored by Looking Forward Life Coaching. Sarah Swan, who is watching this, is the founder of Looking Forward Life Coaching, a great friend of mine too. Looking Forward Life Coaching helps turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones towards success. Visit lookingforwardlc.org for more information. Before we begin, the chat is open and the comments are open on the Facebook events page. I ask that everybody please be respectful and not be respectful of everybody, including and especially the panelists. The way I had planned to do this is that I will be asking the questions of our panelists, and then if some people come in to the actual Zoom chat. There was supposed to be a few more people here, but that's okay. But you know, if others come in, they may ask questions, and if someone audience may ask questions, and if they are not able to, that's fine. But we are, just a little background, some autistic individuals are not able to answer an open-ended question. So please be mindful that that might be the case. Okay. Also, this particular topic of discussion may be triggering for many of you. I am recording this roundtable discussion. If you feel the need to leave to take a break, the link to this discussion will be available at todaysautisticmoment.com/autisticvoices/. If you wish to come back later and watch the rest of this discussion, that is where you'll find it. All right, now let's talk about this actual discussion. The FDA sought to ban the use of shock devices in March of 2020. The hashtag Stop the Shock movement began as a response to federal judges in a 2-to-1 decision that overturned the FDA's ban because, and the ruling said, it interfered with doctors at the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center to practice medicine. And this decision was made in July of 2021. According to many reports that I've seen, it is said that the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center is the only center that is permitted to continue using these shock devices. Our panelists today will be talking about why this particular practice is quite frankly lethal to the dignity and overall well-being of the autistic individuals, because it is designed and used to attempt to make autistics behave like neurotypical people. We have seen these things before and before. It goes back to what I said in one of my advertisements, that unfortunately autistic people are still seen as fish out of water, which obviously there's something wrong with that. So now we're going to please welcome our panelists. We have Tass Cronby, and Tass has been our guest on my on 2 of my shows and does an amazing job every time I talk to them. Lisa Jean Graff, am I saying that name correctly?
Correct.
Thank you. All right. Robert Kloss, have I got that name right too? Thank you. And well, existential, he goes by the name of Matty. And he is joining us from the UK. So with all this said, we're going to begin the roundtable discussion at this time. So I'm going to start with Robert here. And so each of these panelists are going to give you their answers to these questions. I'm going to talk about these for briefly 5 minutes. And we'll go through each of the panelists and hopefully get through this discussion. All right. So my first question to all of the panelists, please tell us your name and what your position on the use of shock devices on autistic people. So let's start. Robert, why don't you begin?
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Robert Klaus. And my position on the use of shock devices on autistic people is I am firmly against it. I'm firmly against it, shock devices on any kind of person, but in this case, it's for trying to correct autistic behavior. It's barbaric. If you need force to correct something, you're not correcting anything, you're conditioning. And it's a barbaric and outdated practice. It should have been left behind. Like today, we don't, if it's even a big backlash against, using any form of shock on animals in experiments. So why should it be okay to shock people? Like I'm just, against any form of shocking to get anything done. And that pretty much sums it up.
Okay, thank you. Tess, you go next.
Hi, everyone. This is Tess. We use they and we pronouns. And as far as the use of shock devices on autistic people, we are firmly against that. It is something throughout the history of humanity and society is continually trying to impose social norms via physical conformity methods, and we view the use of shock devices as barbaric, unethical, and specifically, as Robert brought up, if you have an issue using it on an animal, why are you using it on people? So that is where we stand on that.
Thank you. Lisa.
Hi, my name is Lisa Jean Graff. My position on the use of shock devices on autistic people is that this is a human rights violation. In Mass, corporal punishment in schools was made illegal in 1971. This, however, does not cover disabled students. A bill is currently in committee in the state legislature that, if passed, will protect all students, regardless of disability, to have the same protections against physical harm. This bill is H 225, an act regarding the use of aversive therapy. I am strongly against the use of shock devices on autistic people, as well as the use of other legal aversives, including punching and hitting. I'm also strongly against individuals withholding access to food and bathroom facilities to autistic people for punishment or control.
Where are you from, Lisa?
I'm in Boston, Massachusetts.
Hey, I grew up in Wareham, Massachusetts, so welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maddie.
Yes, hello everyone. My name's Matty, existential autist online. It's a pleasure to be here. I am inherently opposed and disgusted by shock torture treatment. It is not a therapy. and building on the fantastic points made by the panelists so far, it is the abuse of human rights, disability rights, and it removes, through knowing of people who've lived through this, who I speak to in my autistic advocacy and activism, it tries to strip away one's humanity. And from the history of philosophy and psychology, which I'm interested in, and kind of I take a lot of focus in, it has been used continuously to suppress, alienate, and further marginalize those disabled. What we're seeing at the Judge Rotenberg Center, and there will be many other places that may not be named, is this removing that we have the autonomy that any human being has. And it's something that within the UN Human Rights Bill, updated in 2018 and onwards, looking at this not word for word, Lisa discussed law so well, any attempt at these shock treatments has been outlawed in conventions. It is condemned in so many nations around the world. And really people are being silenced as well. There's children and parents who are being silenced in this. So I feel extremely passionate to listen to those survivors of these treatments, and to those as well who are non-speaking or are selectively mute on this, and their voices are continually suppressed, as the psychological torment it causes, as with shock therapy for so many years in history, causes vast psychological, physical, and mental issues. So yes, I'm appalled by it, yet I'm proud of our autistic community and advocates and those interested in human rights and humanity to keep campaigning and speaking up against this. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And thank you to all our panelists for those really great answers. And I am in firm agreement with you. When you heard that the Food and Drug Administration attempted to ban the use of shock devices, how did you respond to that news? Let's start with Lisa.
I responded by sharing on Twitter that Mass had a bill that could address this issue on a state level. At that point, what I was seeing was a lot of discussion about like the federal, and it didn't seem like anyone even knew that the bill existed. So I wanted to, let people know about it. And then within a state level, I advocated for the Mass Dems to include support of this bill in their party platform in 2021, which they did. I also created a letter form that could reach the state legislators who were in the committee reviewing the bill for advocates to share their support of this bill. In addition, I pushed my local city and state representatives to support this bill, which most of them did. In addition, I testified at the hearing of the bill.
Maddie.
So yes, being in the UK, I tried to spread the international message of what was going on, to raise awareness of the Stop the Shock campaign and educate myself, and trying to listen to those who are living through things, sharing petitions, international measures, and linking it to laws internationally and in the UK. And yes, just trying to show solidarity in those ways, but again, trying to platform those living in the experience while giving some advocacy as well. So yeah.
Thank you. Tess.
So yeah, when we saw that announcement, I think our first reaction was, why hasn't that already been banned? 2020, and they're just now looking at that as an issue. And so really looking through, we study a lot on the American eugenics movement and the eugenics movement in general. And when that was announced and we saw that they're looking at banning it, we also just started researching on just the perspective of things that are neurodivergent, disability just throughout the world. And as early as 2019, they were still having debates on the right to life for people that have disabilities or that are autistic or have any kind of developmental type diagnosis. So once we started diving into that, it helped us realize that it's actually not surprising that it took them till 2020 to look at banning it, because people that are autistic are still seen as less than human. And because of that, using less than human methods is promoted. And so that was really just our first reaction to that was, wow, and then to research more on what it really looks like in the world right now, as far as progress goes of accepting people that are autistic.
Thanks, Tess. Robert.
All right, bringing off what Taz said when they brought up, surprised, that it took to 2020 to ban the shock. Like, I too was shocked that it took, pun unintended, that it took that long, to ban such treatment. I'm like, it's dealing with, like, in the late 2010s was when I was coming to term, understand myself better that I am autistic, and what that meant, and doing further research into it, and treatment autistic people receive, especially if they're known about it, and just looking at it, like, I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
Take your time, you're fine.
The fact that it took so long for such treatment to be banned is absolutely horrendous, at least on the federal level with the FDA.
Yeah,
It's unacceptable as a society.
great.
And that's what I have to say on that.
Thanks. Just a brief comment from me. I was really surprised to learn that it hadn't already been banned. I mean, so much for getting into the new century here. I thought it already was. I mean, we've known that for a long time, but pardon me. Apparently, obviously, I was wrong. Okay. Next question. When the federal court ruled that the ban, quote, interfered, end of quote, with doctors at the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center to, quote, practice medicine, what was your response to that? I don't know about anybody else, but just those words, practice medicine. Well, that's one interesting way to practice medicine. And obviously we have a problem, but I kind of like, oh my, really? Tess, go ahead.
So with that, yeah, specifically, like you said, when they're like, it interferes with their ability to practice medicine. So that again, when you look throughout history, things like sanatoriums, asylums in the early 1900s and through the eugenics movement, World War II, there's always been at least one place that is still allowed to use types of experimental treatments, and they view it as medicine. Things like ETC, trepanation, which are still practiced today, just in a smaller amount. So when they say that it's interfering with medicine, they're not really saying that they're trying to actually improve the lives of the autistic individuals. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, we're just trying this out, and we need at least one place that can experiment and see where this goes legally and have it authorized that they can still use these shock treatments. And so that really just was reminiscent of how different types of treatments that are viewed as barbaric are still in practice in the name of developing medicine, is really what it is. So it's autistic people in that specific center, they are the guinea pigs. They are the ones that are being used to further the agenda of changing what being autistic means, making it not an identity, but a problem that needs to be removed from humanity.
Very well said. Very well said. Robert, go ahead.
You know, I've kind of scoff at fair doctors' rights to practice medicine. It's amazing how so many people seem to forget what old Hippocrates himself, the father of Western medicine, once one of his tenets: to do no harm. And when I see this shock therapy, that is only ever doing any harm. It has, they brought up, it's being used as a form of experimentation. It is. And to be completely honest with you, I believe any doctor who advocates for and seeks to implement any form of shock therapy or any form of brutalization of people to do any type of harm to achieve any desired results should at least have their medical license looked at and possibly taken away for such brutality. I might be a bit more radical on that stance, but that's how strongly I feel against such methods. And I'm done.
Okay, fine. Lisa.
Initially, I didn't write too much on this because my initial response was, oh, I don't have much, power on a federal level. I'm going to work locally. But in hearing everyone speak, it got me thinking about my experiences with hospitals and doctors in Massachusetts around how they diagnose autism, what they offer people who are autistic, how I have been treated, how my daughter has been treated. And it's really interesting. There's, of course, a big focus on ABA treatment. And, there's no offering for like, hey, some parents like ABA, but others prefer not to have ABA. Like there's no discussion about like the, what else could happen that would be more nurturing and make more sense. It's not even something that's discussed. And and then, some hospitals have social skills groups, which just seem heartbreaking to me, having, kids meet other kids who are autistic, and then within the group, they're taught, like neurotypical social skills. It just seems so nuts. Like, here's a great space for kids to like have great connections and leave them alone. And that often isn't the case. I'm sure there are a few that like don't do that and they're just looking to build friendships and they stay out of it. But, I have a feeling that's probably, happens not too often. And also there's some work on like having doctor's appointments be more comfortable for people who are autistic. I mean, that's good. Some hospitals have even like talked to people who are autistic to like get advice on how to do that well. So like, I've seen some good stuff from that work, but, on the whole, I'm really disappointed with the way that parents aren't told that there are other options. And I could probably talk on it more, but right now my brain's sort of stuck. So I'd like someone else to keep going. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are really important points, I think. Maddie, go ahead.
Oh, thanks very much. And there's been so many vital and insightful, put a bit of a rhyme in there, with the points made by all the panelists on such a serious topic, and not to joke around this. The thing of to continue practicing medicine, as Robert said there, the nature of this has been manipulated so much within this circumstance. And I've got to be honest about this, and many are starting to see this. It is a eugenics agenda. It is a eroding of human rights. It is something that to practice anything, to have a title and a profession and expertise, it does not then give you the right to take away someone's bodily autonomy, their rights to life, dignity, and again, to parents. I believe it is a coordinated, coercive attempt, what goes on as well within these practices, to separate parents of autistic children from autistic adults and activists and educators and academics, which there are many of us, to create this division, to say we are deficient, don't listen to these people, they've got a dangerous agenda. What a dangerous agenda to uphold human rights and people not going through the abuses and trauma that we may have suffered. And I think it links back to the previous question of, my emotions around this and many others. It is like, in medicine, and not all doctors, acting in bad faith, but a re-traumatization of things we've went through to perpetuate the suffering, to stop people talking out, because, as was said, there'll be one kind of hospital or institution, at least one. This is maybe the tip of the iceberg with things that the public get to know around, that can then, be a beacon of financial interests as well. There is a lot of financial corporations who have a vested interest in the dehumanization of autistic people towards these kind of abusive conversion torture practices. And ABA was touched upon. I appreciate tonight's not the full space, yet holistically they're connected. Yeah, thanks very much.
You're welcome. I do appreciate that response. And before I ask my fourth question, which is actually going to be the last of the questions I have from my panelists, one of the reasons I decided to start today's Autistic Moment podcast, as well as these discussions, these roundtable discussions, is because I feel very strongly that when decisions like this ruling that said that the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center can use this dehumanizing means, is because more times than not, it's the autistic people who have not been consulted. Autistic people are almost always left out of these discussions. Most of the things I read on social media and on the various social media networks that I'm connected with that suggest that treatments like this are a good thing are usually, I hate to say this, but caregivers who want their autistic child or their autistic loved one to just be, quote, normal, or even, some psychiatrists, psychologists, or whatever, just giving their medical opinions and their statistics about whether it's worked or not. And while all that has a benefit, the people that almost always talk about how abusive these practices are the autistic people who are affected by these practices. And what I feel very strongly is that for whatever reason, people have this opinion that autistic people are somehow incompetent about saying how they feel about something, to the point where we're excluded from those conversations. And that's, again, you'll hear me say this on my podcast all the time. This is one of the reasons why I so detest those functioning labels, because all they do is set up autistic people to be othered in whatever, quote, functioning category they happen to be in. And that is why things like this, I feel is so important to give autistic individuals the opportunity to say, this is how I feel about, so that hopefully we can enter into the conversation with some real dialogue from us that, I'm hoping will help lead us to some real social change. when I hear the word practice medicine as a reason for this egregious decision, I just think to myself, well, it's not like they're really using medicine here. I have a problem with that. And this is where my autistic littleness, I think, does me credit. They're saying they're practicing medicine. Oh, really? No. I also find it interesting that this medicine is being used in what is titled as an educational center. Isn't anybody else bothered by that? I am. Well, that's some very interesting education they're giving there. I apologize for chuckling, but I just find that, well, that's an interesting thing, don't you think? All right, my fourth question is going to be, because this is one of those things, I mean, I read about this as time went on. The Judge Rotenberg Educational Center is said to be the only institution that can still use shock devices. When you hear something like that, what is your response to that? Let's start with Lisa.
It makes me embarrassed to be a Massachusetts resident. I think that part of
Massachusetts
my
natives here, so I understand. Go ahead.
yeah, I think it is part of my motivation to push for state legislative changes. It also makes me work on the core reasons for why this bill is needed. ABA and behavioralist approaches are deeply embedded in the state because state insurance covers ABA. Having so many parents and educators have been educated that changing behaviors is more important than meeting student needs makes it hard to make progress on this issue. A lot of bias towards the needs of parents over the needs of their children needs to be addressed too. Like so many, like I went to the hearing and state reps were largely focused on the parents of kids at the JRC and not the people who went there or people that could have gone there, you know, if things have gone a little differently in their lives. And yeah, I'm sort of veering off what I wrote now. Yeah, I'm losing my track. Let's see. It is hard work to educate without causing individuals with power to become defensive, especially parents. Parents of disabled students have the potential to be great allies, so it's worth making the effort. But it's really tricky. Like I've been thinking about like the state reps and how to reach them because like I contacted one office and I asked, you know, have you talked to people who, you know, have been at the JRC? And the answer I got was, yes, we visited the JRC. We talked to the parents, we talked to the kids. I'm like, wait a second, like, but these, you know, the people that are there now, they have like these devices on them. They're not going to give you like honest answers. Have you talked to anyone who was previously at the JRC? And they said, no. And then I'm like, okay, would you like to talk to people who used to be there? And, you know, this was a staff person. It wasn't the representative. And I was told, yes, we'd be interested in that, you know, send contact information. So I made an attempt to do that. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but it just really struck me that like, you know, the staff person was so proud that, you know, other facilities that were similar to the JRC had been visited, you know, like they had been talking, they thought they were like covering all the bases, but they missed this huge, important, you know, group, like the most obvious group. It just blew my mind.
Yeah. Okay, Lisa, let's give Tass a chance to talk. Go ahead, Tass.
Sorry, could you repeat the question for me?
Absolutely. The Judge Rotenberg Educational Center is said to be the only institution that can still use shock devices. What?
Okay, thank
when
you.
When you hear something like that, what is your response to something like that?
So, you know, they're only putting it in one place. Honestly, looking at it from a very strategic, it's very strategic what they're doing. So by only having it in one place, they only have to monitor the usage of it. If there's anything that is used inappropriately with it, which is of course a very wide window considering they're using a shock device. However, it keeps it easier for them to regulate and be able to tell people, oh, this is totally humane, there's nothing. like no abuse going on here. It's fine. So honestly, I'd say it's a very strategic placement. And at the same time, when you have people, as Lisa had mentioned, when you have people that are strapped up to these devices, you're not going to get an honest answer from them about what they really are feeling in this circumstance. So not only is it making it easier for it to be monitored, but it's also removing the autistic voice from the equation completely.
Great. Maddie.
Yeah. So when I hear it is the one place, it is not an educational institution. If it is state-sponsored torture, it is, to me, straight away, when you hear it is one place and everywhere else has took that away, there has to be a corruption there. There has to be an agenda there for something that is insidious, that is removing the autistic voice. Internationally, when this has happened in other countries, it is the pattern there. And what is dangerous to people is our autistic pattern spotting, how we can see this and connecting the dots. And again, I think this panel tonight is an example of that, the heightened empathy we have towards humanity and people's feelings, and trying to I wanted to reach out, hear who's been there, and out of respect to whoever I'll not name, specific things, but knowing of those who've been in abusive practice, and also how that Judge Rotenberg Center deletes and blocks anybody who raises legitimate concerns, and especially autistic people, because then we become gaslighted, seen by giving valid and legitimate concerns as deficient or delusional or making something up. It's because we're speaking truth to power that has, for many years and centuries, dehumanized, institutionalized, and disempowered us. And the example here tonight shows that we won't be silenced till people are stopped being forced to suffer in the ways they are, and until the neurodivergent paradigm and philosophy becomes the way of being for the future, of embracing our true selves and not trying to change us. So yeah, there's a lot of how I feel about that very strongly, but we can see through what they're doing, and the truth will be revealed and is revealed in the end. So yeah.
Well said. Robert, go ahead.
When I first heard about it's the only facility as to such currently in the US, my first thoughts was like relief, like, oh, as dysfunctional as Illinois is, at least the failed state of Illinois isn't trying anything as crazy as this. But after that, thinking about it, I'm like, I get worried that even just this one facility exists is troubling. Like, I feel like it's not described as like a seed of evil experiments going on right there. And if, as I said, it's small, it's isolated, it's only certain people are saying what they're, giving their results. And my worries is that people who see these skewed results, brought forth and might decide, oh, hey, this facility is working. We should open up more of these around the nation. So, we can just shock the autism away. A couple volts of electricity through the body. What's the worst that can happen? It's just not damaging. Oh, it absolutely is damaging. But this is just how these horrific things go. Like, there's no one descends into, there's no descension into pure evil overnight. It's small, tiny baby steps by individuals who know what they're doing to gain power, gain influence, and try to demonstrate, hey, look what we're doing. What we're doing is good. And they like shroud their activities in, language that makes themselves look better. Like, people brought up the old US eugenics movement. That wasn't, they were like, oh, we're just trying to help humanity, get rid of undesirable traits, build a better, human stock. And we saw how that got out of control and had spread overseas and like a poison across the world. And I feel like even if it is just one facility in Massachusetts, it needs to be stopped now before it starts gaining ground and gaining traction and gaining acceptance, especially in a society where so much autistic neurodivergent people are infantilized and treated as the lesser, and having our autonomy taken away, or not treated like people, treated as children, like children at best, even when we're adults. And what's I have to say on that?
Very good. Well, I hear what all of you have said, and I tend to agree. When it's one group, one place that gets to use something like that, where does it end? Or better yet, where does it go to after that? Okay. Our panelists have done a fantastic job with talking about their responses and thoughts to these things. And this is going to begin for me to start talking about my closing remarks here. Let me warn you all in advance, my panelists, as well as the audience that maybe listen or will listen to this presentation. The quote I am about to read may be very triggering. And I say that because if you haven't heard the name Ivar Lavas, you should know that he is the founder of ABA therapy, who also, by the way, did recommend the use of shock devices for autistic individuals as a part of that therapy. What may trigger you is to hear a quote from what this man wrote or said. Quote, "You see, you start pretty much from scratch when you work with an autistic child. You have a person in the physical sense. They have hair, a nose, and mouth, but they are not people in the psychological sense. One way to look at the job of helping autistic kids is to see it as a matter of constructing a person. You have the raw materials, but you have to build the person." If that does not disturb people, then people are not listening, and quite frankly, I'm going to be quite honest, your heart needs to be looked at. You should also know that the same person used the same kind of language and the same techniques as the man who helped pioneer gay conversion therapy. I don't know if you knew that, but that is one of those things. Whenever we talk about a quote unquote therapy or a practice used by someone with a quote like that, that does not sound like a good idea. That doesn't even sound like anything anybody should really think is a wise decision. There are those who support the use of these quote therapies that would say that this quote is taken out of context. A context that says that you start from scratch and you're, quote, building a person or constructing a person. Please don't tell me that that can be taken in any other context. It is obvious what they're trying to say, at least to me. When any group of people is targeted to be, quote, cured or, quote, fixed by a, quote, therapy such as this, once again, where does it stop? It won't stop until we have made the message clear. Just because people are different in any way, shape, or form, it is not an excuse to disregard their human dignity by violating their sense of well-being. About a year ago, less than a year ago, I did a podcast, which I strongly encourage people to listen to. It's called Autistic Adults, Justice in Employment. And that episode was particularly moving for me because it was done by, with Samuel J. Levine. He is the director of the Jewish Law Center and a professor of law at the Touro College in New York. He is a brilliant advocate for people with, disabled individuals, and he advocates for people, for disabled people to be employed, including autistic people. There was something he said in there that I think applies also to things like therapies as well as employment or any other subject that we could possibly name. Part of the problem is the laws only get us so far. As we are seeing, a ban or a law can in fact be changed whenever there's an election that puts in a new majority. We are seeing ad nauseum in the United States that a law can be passed and judges can gather and change that law if they're so persuaded and if they're so part of a group of people. It is Samuel J. Levine's position and mine that the way to bring real change begins in changing the mindset of how others understand autistic people and others with disabilities. Until we stop making disabled individuals and autistic people an othered individual who is said to have these things that they can't fix or they can't do. That's part of the problem here. I just want to say on on May 25th, 2022, I will be hosting the next Autistic Voices Roundtable discussion, and it is entitled The Truth About ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis Therapy. I already know that this is going to be a really touchy subject, a very difficult subject, and I'm sure I'm going to get my share of interesting emails just for having said that. But if you wish to be a panelist, the application process will begin on April 1st, and you will have until April 29th to submit your application. I need to emphasize that when it comes to Autistic Voices Roundtable discussions, I must have people send me an application, and I go through them and I consider very carefully. I must admit it's a little difficult to decide how many or who, but the point is that I really feel that there needs to be, I need to really select people, select the right people. So if you want to be a panelist for that particular discussion or any of the other upcoming Autistic Voices Roundtable discussions, you must submit an application. I invite you to listen to the podcast and watch for more news on today's autisticmoment.com/autistic voices. Once again, this video, I am going to show it. I'm going to get it recorded, and I am going to work on a transcript that people can follow. And I'm going to post it into Autistic Voices Roundtable discussion. When you go to the actual Autistic Voices Roundtable discussion, the subject, Stop the Shock, will be highlighted. You either tap or click on that, and you will get the link for the recording. So I first want to thank my panelists. You have all done a tremendous job with talking about this particular topic. Congratulations, and thank you so much. And your thoughts are indeed spot on, I think, and very, very important. So thank you to everyone who has joined us for this Autistic Voices Roundtable discussion. And as I end my podcast with lately, may you all have an autistically amazing day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop.